And we are live for another episode of Agencyphonics Lockdown Style. I think we're 5 or 6 weeks into lockdown now. My hair's got crazy. I'm wearing a baseball cap. I think many of you can empathize and feel that. I've had to had quite a few technical changes at home. Managed to get much faster broadband out to the countryside, and I'm not quite there with all of the microphone technology yet at home, but it's all on order. So we're getting there. We're getting more tech at home to make these broadcasts even slicker. But as always, a massive thank you to Simon at Wirehive, who has given up his time again today to help us stream this live onto YouTube using Live Nation. And many of you are probably saying, well, we could use other products on the marketplace to do this, which may have less lag, but they won't go live straight away. And we wanted to try and retain the live format. So please bear with us today. It'll probably be a little bit like watching the sort of coronavirus updates as you're seeing them live on satellites. There may be a short delay between our responses, but hopefully we'll get some good content and we will get some maybe a little bit less slicker, honest, gritty conversation. That's what I'm hoping to get from this. So I hope everyone's safe and well out there. I haven't got Pete with me today. He's tied up with some consultancy work, so it's just myself, and I'm really looking forward to introducing my two guests today. Both guests I've known for quite a while now, and whilst they both work for Microsoft, that's pretty much a coincidence, really, and almost like a byproduct of why they're here, because I've known, first of all, Ingrid for quite a long time. We've known each other because she has a background in agencies. And so I've known her for a few years on her career path, and I wanted her to come today to help us understand more about her perspective being on the agency side and now being on Microsoft side and understanding almost both sides of the partnership to see what's good and bad about, I guess, both sides of it and how to work it best. And second of all, James, who I've known personally because of obviously Microsoft's relationship with Wirehive. I've met him there, but the reason why we connected very quickly was that he was actually reading Agencyphonics at the time and had said to me that he found the partnership stuff very interesting, and he'd always wanted to write a book on strategic partnerships and alliances, which is a subject very close to my heart. So we had a good chat. So I know that he has some good personal opinions and that he can share with us around his thoughts on it. So without further ado, let's welcome our two guests into. We've just got a small sound issue here. The joys of live broadcasting are happening. James, you're back apparently. Ingrid?
Yeah.
I can hear you, Spencer.
Welcome. Welcome. So, first of all, Ingrid, would you mind just giving us a little bit of a background on who you are, what you've done, and where you are today?
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having me. So, who am I? So currently, my role is working as an agency partner lead within Microsoft. So you really focused on how we build strategic relationships with some of our large agency partners. But really, I guess the reason I know you, Spencer, is many years working in a number of SME agencies, both in the UK, and a role that was agency related back in South Africa many years ago. Predominantly focused around kind of client services, new business and partnerships. And so it feels like I'm still very much within my kind of agency home, even though I'm now in, a much, much bigger technology organization.
Yeah. So what's your role now at Microsoft?
So my role is a partner development manager. So, 3 years ago, Microsoft embarked on looking at agencies as our partners of the future. I think as an organization, we've always had, a huge wealth of partners. But really, up until 3 years ago, agencies were not really part of that. And so Microsoft embarked on setting up an agency program. Focusing first of all with some of our smaller local agencies, and I joined them a year ago to focus on taking that program kind of into some of our larger global network customers, but actually really focusing on they've been a customer of ours, we've been a customer of theirs, but how do we now forge a strategic partnership to enable us to go to market together and actually deliver value together into our mutual customers.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. And I'm really sorry, even though, how many years have we known each other for?
7, 8, maybe somewhere around there.
And I still can't pronounce your second name.
Most people can't. It's Olmesdahl, for the record.
Thank you, which is why I missed it, honestly, in the intro, because I just suddenly remembered I never get it right. So thank you. One day I will master it. So James, welcome.
Thank you. Much simpler name to pronounce.
James Marshall. I should have said your full name, sorry. So James, can you give us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now?
Sure. So I've been at Microsoft for a long time. This is my 10th year, in fact, with the company. But in that time, I've kind of worked across a lot of areas that we touch, right from customer, partner, and various roles in between. Most recently, working with our agency and reseller partners. So kind of what Ingrid talked about, her focus on agencies. My role, we were in the same team for a long time, was not just looking at them, but looking at all types of partners that Microsoft kind of worked with, whether those are like big distributors, small agencies, startups, kind of everything in between. For a while, I was the CTO for our SMB business in the UK, and in March, I actually started a new job. So I now am the Azure Customer Lead for our SMB segment. So looking at how we take all of that great cloud power from an Azure perspective, at least, and then get that into the hands of customers, which, as you can imagine, especially at the moment, really hot topic. Loads of people looking at how they can use things like virtual desktop and stuff. So really busy time to be starting a new job. And the agency space has been fascinating. I had the pleasure of working with Hive, particularly in the last couple of years, and just understanding the challenges that they face has been an education. But also shows me that there's a lot of things that they do really well that other types of partner could learn from, and vice versa. So one of the things I'm focusing on is how we can, to your point about writing that book, is set down almost the Bible for how to get this done right, in a sort of more modern way.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll dig deeper on that in a moment. So thank you for that introduction. That's great. And I think just so everyone knows, I think the connection with Hive is quite an interesting one, because they have they started out predominantly with a channel of working with agencies in partnership, and therefore creating mutual beneficial partnerships was quite an important part of that journey for them, and it's helped them establish, to become the leader, really, supplier of infrastructure. You say Azure, is it not Azure? No one can pronounce it properly.
I say Azure, but I spend a lot of time with my corporate colleagues, so I guess it's just kind of like imprinted. However it works best for you.
Tomato, I don't know. I think Azure that's how I call it, but Azure's maybe the new one, sorry. So Ingrid, tell me, with all of your experience when you worked in agencies through the years, tell me a little bit about what you saw that worked well from people, and especially more for the SME side of things. When did you see partnerships working well? What did people do when it worked well? And maybe more so, what did it not, when it didn't work well, what did it look like as well? Can you give me some kind of sort of background on your experiences?
Yeah, of course. So I think partnerships, I will say, take work. One partnership that looks to be doing really well in terms of delivering results. What you don't see underneath that is probably 12 months worth of work that's been, extremely challenging to get there. Certainly, I've seen some fantastic partnerships with some of the agencies that I've worked with. So, guess naming kind of a partnership that we had one with a CMS platform when I was in one of my agencies, and certainly we saw that. That partnership really delivering kind of strong, a strong number of leads for us. It was giving us a really great exposure into, an enterprise space, and that was delivering the kind of hard numbers that we needed to see as an as a 60-person agency that was looking to grow. And I think that worked well because of quite a good expectation setting on both sides. With both organizations, we were a small agency; they were a large technology provider, and so we recognize that we want different things, and we run our businesses very differently. But there was a good kind of level at which we met in the middle to say, these are the things that we need to get out of it, and that certainly worked very well. I've definitely seen ones that haven't worked as well, and that's again kind of very much about that expectation setting. People go into a partnership perhaps with a large technology vendor, hoping to generate leads within 3 months, and kind of saying, these are the things that I want, and this is what I want to get out of it, but kind of crossing each other, and not giving it time to bed in. My feeling is after 3 months, if your partnership isn't working perfectly, don't let it go. Stop. Be really honest and transparent about these are the things that really don't align. These are some of the challenges that we have, because these things, they really start to pay dividends 2 years down the line, even kind of 4 years down the line.
Wow.
And so, just kind of, being realistic and clear about what you want to get out of them is certainly the kind of things that I've seen that help partnerships grow in the right way.
That's fantastic. And I think the first thing I'm taking from that is the longevity, because I remember I had and in our book, we talk about the story about I used to spend like £100 a month on a very low cost hosting provider. And one day, someone called me up who provided more enterprise. This is before cloud, more enterprise level hosting. And I swapped my £100 a month hosting solution for a £2,600 a month, £400 a month solution. But I did that because the value, although I was paying for the service with the low cost hosting provider, I was getting nothing back. Like, I was just getting a good service, and I wasn't getting any value adds. There was nothing more strategic. I'd refer business to them, but they'd never refer business back to me. But as soon as I went to the more enterprise, this was a very large global company, suddenly I found that I paid more money, but the value exchange was better. Not only would I help them find more customers, they'd find me more customers, and we would add value in many different ways to each other's businesses. And although I got very lucky and within 3 months I won some business, the reality is, as you said, in most cases, people are too quick. If nothing happens in 6 months, they quit and walk away. So I think it's the first really good lesson to share with everyone is, as long as everyone's communicating with each other on a regular basis and you're still striving for the partnership to be equal over an 18-month to 2-year cycle, you should see some success. So James, tell me a little bit about your experience with partnerships.
Yeah, so I think the point about partnerships taking time is absolutely critical to keep that in mind. The partnerships that I've worked on in the last couple of years really tell that story completely, time and again, because distribution partners, they're big beasts, right? And when they're working with smaller companies, often that value exchange is kind of is diminished somewhat, in as much as they perhaps see the smaller businesses as almost too small to invest too much time and effort in. It's like, here is a price, here is a way that you can buy from us, go sell your business off that. And actually, as things have moved on, particularly as we've moved towards cloud services, and the business models that fall off the back of cloud services, that recurring revenue that builds up over time, small businesses have said, look, you know what, we need more than just a good price here. We need a leg up. We need help with how we market, what skills we need and how we get them, and also in terms of just numbers of resources. Small businesses, agencies, and other types of organization don't necessarily have fleets of consultants on benches just waiting to be parachuted in to help a customer, or they don't have tons of marketing people just ready at a moment's notice to spin up a campaign. You can imagine. So those bigger partners and tech vendors like us, we need to be able to provide those services as well as the price, as well as the product, to give those businesses a leg up. Because actually, when you do that, there's a concept called the rule of 78, which talks about how you build a recurring revenue business. So to Ingrid's point, yes, it can take a couple of years sometimes, but it's not like you'll go from zero through year one, through year two, and then at the end of year two, there'll be this massive explosion in revenue. Actually, over the course of those months, if you add little bits each time, if you grow a customer a little bit or add a new customer, and you get that help and support to build your skills and everything else, then before you know it, you've actually built what actually is a really quite massive business, almost by accident. Because if you add a customer consistently every month, then within 1 year, you have 78 chances to bill, right? Because that turns into 144 chances overnight as you go into that second year, and so on. The business grows and grows. So the partnerships that, just to round off, the ones that have worked really well are the ones where that's been recognized, and that they've really moved towards being like equals. It's not a case of we're this David and Goliath situation, we're multi-billion and you're barely breaking even. Like, it's saying, look, we each bring different things to the table. Here's how we're going to help you. It's not just about lead sharing. I hear it day in, day out. How can we get more leads out of Microsoft? Actually, that's a tiny part of the overall piece. So it's when it's equals. When it's not, the biggest failures I see as a counterpoint is where there's just lack of communication. So even where that value exchange isn't equal, even where people don't feel like it's a balanced relationship, if the communication fails, that's where it tends to go wrong. And it's normally because people aren't afraid of holding each other to account, and they're not afraid, they're afraid rather of having that honest conversation about what a partnership looks like. And so what happens is they just go their separate ways without ever saying officially goodbye, and then of course neither is helping each other, and I think that's what leads to failure.
I've seen that so many times, James, that kind of people leaving things to end, and I love that comment about partnerships being equal, because someone once said to me, a business partnership or strategic alliance has got to be a bit like a marriage. If both parties aren't equal, it will never work. And so actually, I think that trying to make sure that balance is there. As soon as one side feels like the other one's gaining more from the relationship, there's some kind of tension there. Ingrid, have you experienced kind of that side of things? Seen maybe where people are putting lots of effort in, the other side aren't, and it's sort of led to a breakdown in partnership?
Yes, absolutely. Certainly seen that be the case. I think that comes back to that expectation setting early on. I think is very key. If you want to generate leads in a short period of time, there are probably other mechanisms that you could use to kind of generate that business. in the same way as you would see if you were looking to win an enterprise client, often from the day you meet the client to the day that you actually close a deal with them as an agency. Certainly, in my previous business, we would work to a 12 to 18 month lead time. And the same applies with partnerships. Just how you would use those new business lead times, marketing lead times, the sort of lead times you expect of potentially an event. The same applies for the lead time around partnerships. And I think that's where that common breakdown comes from, that somebody comes in going, I want more leads from Microsoft or whatever it is, expecting a kind of generation in a couple of months, and unfortunately on the other side of the fence, on the other side of the partnership, perhaps somebody's really keen to build this relationship and isn't as upfront and clear on day one to say, this is a 12-month journey. We need to set some milestones we want to achieve in months 1, 2, and 3, so you can prove that to your organization. And those are certainly kind of the ground rules that if you get in place, you can help yourself from not having those fallouts.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about the value, there obviously is periphery value. James, you talked about training. We talked about the other areas that you can add value in sales, and I would say that I think one of the things that people often mistake, I think, with a strategic partnership is they assume that organization is going to bring them back leads, but actually it's not the organization, it's the people. And actually, when you partner with an organization, and I've certainly seen this, by the way, with people that are partnered with Microsoft historically, where it hasn't worked out, where they fail to almost try and connect to enough people, or to try and build enough relationships deeper in the organization. They tend to have one point of contact and think it stops there. And when I go back to my example I said earlier on about the older infrastructure model hosting business I worked with way back when, I made friends with all of I still made friends, but over the time I built some friendships with all of the sales team there, the product managers, the support teams, and all of those people became we would do joint events together. We'd become almost more than just associates. There would be more friendship there. And even if they had friends or family or people that they knew in their network generally that needed a particular type of agency, they would probably introduce me. It would be nothing to do with their company, just because actually I'm sure there are people every now and then that come to you two and say, do you know an agency that could do branding or could do something? And somewhere in your travels, you've crossed those people. So partnerships are deeper than the organization. It's also the people. James, what do you think of that? Have you experienced that side of it yourself?
Yeah, it's absolutely, the people aspect can't be underestimated. And I think that's why, it's hard for organizations in general, I suppose, but my experience with Microsoft, it's hard because people churn in different parts of the business quite quickly in some cases. And so those networks sometimes are quite hard to keep going. But you're dead right.
Yeah.
Like, I could count the number of people that come to me and say, I've got this project, or I need help with this area. And I'm like, you need to speak to this person or that person, because time in your industry, you can't buy that, right? You can't buy that knowledge. You can't buy that network. And we have there's a tech industry trend, I suppose, towards the younger demographic, people who are earlier in career, and bringing those people into the industry. And that's absolutely right. Of course, I'm not taking away from that, because it's important that we do that. But I think that has to be done with the understanding that there are people who've been around a while, who know people, and that's how a lot of business is done. I think one of the ways that we move that conversation forward, though, actually, is getting partners to just demonstrate what they do. So rather, every day I hear about something on my network, a story, an anecdote, or informally almost. And I keep thinking to myself, why aren't you shouting about that stuff more proactively? Why are you waiting for me to bump into the CEO of Wirehive or chat to somebody in the not chatting to the corridor at the moment, but you know what I mean? Like, why are you waiting for these like serendipitous moments to happen when you should be shouting about your successes and promoting yourselves? I think people have got to get better at that. It feels really awkward sometimes for some organizations to like put themselves out there. They're so used to promoting their clients and doing work for their customers. But you'll find more business if you shout about the great successes you have, because people want to work with people who actually have demonstrable results. So yeah, it's certainly true where we are today, but I think it needs to change in the future.
I think what you've said there is definitely one of the challenges in my experience, obviously going into lots of agencies in particular, where sometimes it's a confidence issue around, they do great work, but there's almost this kind of reluctance or fear of shouting about it because it may not be as good as somebody else's, and actually it is. And I think there is this fear to overcome for a lot of people to shout about it. And sometimes they probably seek the confidence of getting the partner to do it with them, to share almost to sort of give them more confidence that it should be done together. It gives them more credibility. But I totally agree. I mean, I work with some great agencies at the moment who are working in more immersive technologies. So they're much more advanced on, let's say, augmented reality or virtual reality, and that's kind of a really big growth area right now. Okay, but I'm like banging my head against the wall, going, guys, you've got to shout about this work. It's brilliant. Whether it be with a partner or direct, because actually don't wait for, for one of the partners to help you create a joint case study and get it out there. Do it yourself and just shout about it and reference the partner company. And they will notice it over time if you keep talking about them. I see a person often actually talking a lot about some Microsoft technology stuff he does, and he's not doing it with you guys, but it's certainly helping, just getting the work he's doing out there. And I'm sure as a result, that person ends up on your radar. So yeah, I mean, Ingrid, did you find that when you were at agencies, it took a while to get, did you sort of see, it'd be quite difficult for agencies to sort of almost get the case studies out to promote joint activity they did with, or did you see that work well generally or badly, or what was your experience?
I think that is one of agencies' biggest challenges. I think unfortunately a lot of them are not set up to be sales organizations. A lot of agencies do, phenomenal work marketing for their customers, but certainly, the kind of focus on selling is often a dirty word in a lot of agency businesses. And I think, yeah. Getting case studies together as well, and kind of really driving that cycle of promotion around great work and kind of shouting about it is a challenge for a number of reasons. That not being sales organizations is one thing very much. There's often unfortunately challenges about their ability to share some stuff. They're not always able to share, but also just getting that marketing machine kind of going to really produce that collateral and get it out. I think thinking about the partnership side as well is often what I've seen within agencies is partnerships are an afterthought. They're perhaps a role that somebody in marketing looks after, or somebody in sales, or perhaps somebody who acts as a bit more of an administrator across those few roles. And I think what people forget is that partnerships is sales. It is absolutely a sales role. And, if I could refer to kind of the Microsoft piece for just kind of given my experience over the last year, that, the success for you as an agency is your ability to not just, work with somebody like myself or some of my colleagues, but it's actually really building that network and selling into our sales teams and kind of, through that channel that Microsoft provides you. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a gap in terms of, what you think the role needs to look like, but actually what the kind of success metrics and the sorts of people you need to have involved in really kind of capitalizing on a partnership in the long run.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And do you think, from all your experience of working in agencies, that if you were running an agency, you would actually create a dedicated partnership role in the business? Just someone who just worked in a sales role, partnerships, because you don't often see that in the majority of agencies.
No, I guess because I'm a salesperson and come very much from that commercial background, if I were to set up an agency, absolutely, marketing would be its own role, business development would be its own role, partnerships and client services. I think they all add their own value, and they need to be able to level off to each other and actually kind of, have equal responsibility. I think, if any of those roles cross each other, you're not going to get enough value out of driving those kind of all four mechanisms to help you grow your organization. But I think as well, great thinking comes from, marketing should challenge partnerships, and it should challenge business development and client services. They should all ultimately work together to deliver great success for the agency. But I think kind of having four clear areas is important. Appreciate in a small organization that's more challenging. And I guess even if you're one person, to maybe think about it in these are four very distinct areas of my business that are driving growth, but they are not one and the same thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a presentation where I talk about the perfect sales team in an agency, and on the model, when it's let's say about 4 million in billings, I bring a partnership manager in because I think the economics kind of work at that point. But I think I do totally agree. Having separate marketing, separate business development, having potentially the client services, the client growth, and having a partnership, because partnerships in most agencies, you're probably aware of in the book as well, I talk about the 30-30-30-10 of new business. And actually in our last lead generation survey, we discovered that actually there are now four of those four areas. It's much more equal. Like majority of agencies do get at least 25% of their business from strategic partnerships. So it kind of feels like, it deserves that resource. I think the owners of the business tend to try and take over the partnerships, but they can be quite busy, right? And I guess they don't always have the time to, if things, if there are other business interruptions, to then dedicate to that partnership relationship. So James, tell me, what else have you were going to write a book on partnerships. So what other nuggets of wisdom and pearls of wisdom can you share with us that really you might help an agency who's listening to this about their approach, I guess, to partnerships?
So just on the point about a partner person,
yes,
I think a pearl of wisdom there I would definitely have is that they shouldn't necessarily just be seen as a partnership person in a sort of philosophical sense. Certainly when you deal with big vendors like Microsoft, and I'm sure other tech vendors have similar kinds of programs, those people can also be responsible for ensuring that you don't leave anything on the table. I see time and again stories of not just agencies, other smaller partners, other businesses that just don't seem to put the rigor into making sure they get every penny that they are entitled to. And I don't just mean, the invoicing their customers. I mean rebates and incentives, bounties, other offers that might be going on. They kind of just leave that stuff to go unaddressed because they think either it's too complicated maybe, or there's not much in it for them, or maybe they just plain don't know. And that goes back to that partnership with distribution. Like their job should be making you aware of how to maximize those earnings. So those partnerships people, like they can have a real difference when it comes to the amount of money that's coming in, because they can make sure that you're getting that full representation of what you should have. It drives me mad to think that there are businesses out there there that are just, as I say, leaving money on the table for the really great work that they do. They just either don't fill in a form or don't tick a box or don't register for a portal, and then they just leave it all, and it all just goes into a black hole. And I wrote several blog posts as I was putting together a framework a little while ago. Questions that I would encourage every partner to ask when they're thinking about partnering up. In my context, it was with a Microsoft partner, but the questions ring true in many ways as well. And it's the what are you going to do for me? It's not just what price are you going to offer or what technology are you going to use or what portal do you have, all of those sorts of things. It's actually what are you going to do? And I think Ingrid mentioned this about having a plan, having a set of commitments to each other. How are you going to know that this partnership is going to be successful? And what's the rhythm that you're going to set to check in on that? My point earlier about communication, how are you going to know if this is going well or not? And how are you going to course correct? I think if you can make things as clear and as simple as possible, then you can be really effective. It might not necessarily seem like you've agreed to many joint aims, but actually if you can do 2 or 3 things really, really well, that's so much better than trying to do 50 things really badly, right? So I think that's important. And I think you've got to not be afraid of taking your business elsewhere. So to sort of flip it on its head, the model has changed somewhat. So years ago, not even years ago, a little while ago, the person you bought your supplies from had the power, in a sense, because they dictated the price. They could dictate the terms. The deal was done, and then they would see you again, maybe when you needed to buy new servers or whatever it might be. And once the money was in the bank, they were laughing, right? Because the deal is closed. So if you're not happy about it afterwards, well, that's happened now. Of course, Right now, agencies like the power has shifted towards them in a sense that actually as they build up their success, the power almost is in their favor, because they can turn around and say, you know what, we've got, 50 clients spending X amount per month, blah, blah, blah. We're going to take our business to a different partner because actually they offer us more. They might be 1 or 2 points more expensive, but you know what? Kind of to your example about switching hosters to the one that was more expensive, this one's going to make sure that all my tech guys are certified on the latest technology. They're going to make sure that my go-to-market strategy is improved. And those case studies that I've been really struggling to tell, you know what? They've got a great team that are going to copyright for me and help me get this published and help me spread that and scale that. So suddenly they can take their business and they can do that really easily. So now, if you are the Goliath of old, suddenly you've got to really start thinking, well, what happens if all of my people wake up one day and realize that they're going to get better service elsewhere? How do I compete with that? And so they've got to do that's not to trash talk big partners, right? Because a lot of them do excellent work, but they've got to get better at demonstrating that too. They've got to get better at marketing themselves, because Ingrid mentioned sales is a dirty word. Like, a lot of these organizations just don't sell themselves. It's like, we're a known quantity, we're here if you need us. It's like, no, you've got to prove what you do now. Shout about it. You've got to make it really clear and friction free as well. Like, no agency, nobody, I don't even want to sit there and trawl through paperwork and contracts and legalese and everything else. I just want to go to a website, pop in some details, sign up to something, and get doing and get on with business. And I think that whole Microsoft channel is still going through an evolution of trying to simplify everything. So those lean organizations that don't even have an office, let alone anything else, like it's all done by app, it's all done by web. They should be able to transact in seconds. It's a whole transformation that's got to happen.
I totally agree with that, and I know you guys probably, like everybody, has had their difficulties in trying to simplify those kind of parts of having a budget. And do you know what I really like that as well? You sort of, as you were speaking then about maximizing the benefits of a partnership as well. And for me, weirdly, I instantly sort of went to my e-commerce days and flipped back to when I used to have a payment gateway integrating into all of my shops. Actually, all of the payment gateways factor in a small margin that they will give you if you use their gateway. And so I had one of the UK's largest jewelers, and actually I earned a small percentage of every transaction. And that was kind of what many of my competitors didn't know that they could do that. And it wasn't that anyone was making it all, no one was really sort of raking money away from the client, because this was just taken out of their current billing structure. And so actually, it probably is a really good idea, James, to do almost an audit as an agency of all your suppliers and go back and just investigate more. As you rightly said, you don't know what you don't know. And by the way, I've come across loads of people who, and this isn't me, obviously promoting you guys, but I am, in a way that I will meet people who don't really understand the benefits of being a partner with Microsoft and the value adds that you guys can deliver in it. And they're missing out on the rebates and on the software they can get and things like that to help with their development and all the benefits that come with being a different level of partner. And in some cases, they're spending thousands of pounds they shouldn't be. So yeah, so who are all those partners and what are those benefits that you're missing out on? And also sometimes maybe ask other people, other agencies who are working with those vendors, to ask them, well, what do they get from the relationship, to make sure they're not missing out, I guess.
And just on that, the cultural thing is really important. There are loads. I mean, there are something like 43 what we would call distribution or indirect providers that can sell into the UK. Something like 23 of them are based in the UK, right? Every single one is different. They all ultimately do the same thing in terms of the way they sell, but culturally, focus wise, they all do very different things. And I think when you're looking at, you say doing that audit, that should be part of it. Like, who speaks your language, who gets your industry, who gets your market? Do you just want a sort of relatively generic broad line who kind of plays a little bit in everything but doesn't really have a specialist focus? Or actually, are you more of a dev house? Do you need people that have got more specialist dev skills that can help you with evolving the way you take products to market from a tech perspective? Or do you want people like Wahai, for example, who are more plugged into the agency space, who've got that network as well as the experience? They're not all created equally, and when you do that audit, you've got to think, well, who looks and sounds like us? Who could we really do business with? That's as big a piece as much as anything.
We need to take those blog articles, if you can share them with us. We'll put them on the show notes as well, because that could be quite useful information there to give people some insights.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. So Ingrid, is there anything else that I was sharing a story with you earlier on when we caught up to talk about how we were doing today's technology, and I shared a story with you, which was something that really resonated with me when. And it has done quite recently, actually. Generally, actually, even in our business, Cactus, which is our full-time job, and some of the partnerships we have, and it actually started with. And it's funny because I always ask agencies to print out a list of all of their suppliers, and because suppliers are partners effectively. If you're buying something from somebody, they're not just suppliers. There's an opportunity to partner. Now, you could have technology partners. You could have other agencies as partners. There may be media partners, other areas, but suppliers is one. And for me, when I had my agency, I was approached by a well-known, quite a sort of a prestigious bank, let's call them, about becoming a customer. Now, although this wasn't for my business, it's for me personally. They contacted me because of the business that I was in and how successful my agency was becoming. And when I became a customer of this bank, they offered me this fantastic experience where I could bring in other people I knew to experience this bank as well, which I did. I'd bring people into the bank and they would put on these fabulous lunches, and a few of those people I introduced became clients. And before I knew it, the bank was then hosting these incredible dinners with the most incredible network entrepreneurs. I'm talking incredible network of entrepreneurs, right? And I'm now, my network has gone to a whole new level, and I'm winning business from a whole new level of person that I couldn't meet every day in a institute of directors room or whatever. Today, I still bank with that bank, but I get nothing back. I get none of that stuff happens anymore. And I started to question recently, why do I bank with this bank still? Because actually I could switch to one of the new, challenger banks that are that have got much better software. It's easier to use, the technology's there. But actually, I realized that it wasn't the bank's fault that the relationship had changed. It was my fault. I'd stopped putting the effort in that I did. When I stopped putting the effort in, they stopped putting the effort in. So today, whenever I look at choosing a partner, I always start with who can I really help and who can I really make a difference to? And then once I do that, then I go and almost explore the opportunity to partner. And Ingrid, you and I were talking, and you said to me that, you were talking about this kind of this one-sidedness, that you get out what you put in almost, yeah. And so from your experience, would you say that that story I'm sharing with you, does that resonate with you? Have you seen a lot of examples of that where maybe someone's expecting more to come, but they're just not putting the effort in?
I've seen that. I've seen that many times. I think I really like your approach about thinking, how can you look at your suppliers and understand, how can they be partners? A lot of the time you find agencies feeling a bit frustrated or disappointed by the service that they're getting from one or other organization, and kind of not really seeing the kind of value ROI. But then, when you ask, well, have you done an assessment of what more that you can get from this relationship? That that investment hasn't always kind of gone in. And there's also, you can find successful partnerships in very many kind of interesting places. I know, a few years ago when I worked for an agency, Mando, that's was based in Liverpool and London. They had a really great attitude to, have flexibility about where you find your partnerships. It doesn't necessarily need to be just with technology vendors because we can see this is going to give us X. It was, also invest in building relationships with other agencies, with kind of networks of people that are maybe, founders and entrepreneurs, which don't, that doesn't give you an immediate, I'm going to get an ROI out of that. I guess your banking example is a great story as well. That wouldn't be something that an agency would traditionally think of. How do we look for a partnership in that? I think the other thing that always fascinates me is some of the businesses I've worked with have always really prided themselves on being agnostic, and being, that has been a really, really strong part of their proposition. And so therefore they work with multiple providers, not just cloud providers, but kind of other technology vendors. And, of course, they'll have some preference within the organization. But I always think, sure, you can remain agnostic and you can provide a leading, trusted consultancy service to your customers. But if you use all three cloud vendors, for example, absolutely, that's great. Build a relationship across each one, but also, understand what more you can get from that. Because, specifically in one of the previous businesses I was in, I was just like, there's so much more, as to James's point, there's so much more on the table. And if you just invested a little bit more time in understanding, what are the benefits? What are just the rebates that I could get for doing what I already do today? Which is not even doing it on an active basis. It's just saying, if I continue running my business like this, but I give an extra 2% to scoop up some of the rebates, and I do think that there's a whole world of missed opportunity to start to give some really secure and repeatable revenue and opportunities, which, as we know, for agency businesses is one of the single biggest challenges for their organization, is that repeatable recurring revenue.
Do you know the point you said at the beginning as well around about the partnerships? I had a partnership, and actually, I'm not going to use my story. I saw another agency that partnered with a major UK charity. And so what they did was they channeled all of their work. It's like an alternative approach to partnerships. All of their work got channeled into helping that charity, not just not by doing work, but actually by raising by raising money. So as an agency, all of their charitable donations would be, or everything they did for charity or not for profit would go to that charity. But that charity was also supported by an incredible list of entrepreneurs. So it gave them a way to not only support the channel, but build a fantastic network of contacts. And the charity were really happy about this, by the way, because they want to add value back to the people who are supporting their charity. So by them bringing these businesses in and bringing those businesses together, it was a win-win for everybody in the partnership. And so I think, yeah, your example, just thinking a bit laterally around, anyone could be a partner. Your story, Amanda, I think that's really smart. I think don't be limited to just thinking, the standard, I'm going to partner with other agencies, I'm going to partner with a technology business, I'm going to partner with a supplier. There are some other clever, unique areas. I would say, by the way, this is probably not so relevant for you guys, but for the agencies, as you know, a lot of businesses have had to apply for the COVID loans, for the government providing the loans to support their businesses. And it's funny, the agencies that have strong relationships with their bank managers are definitely the ones that got the loans approved the quickest, the fastest, the smartest, and got it through. And James, I'll take your point. The younger agency owners who don't understand that you need to have a relationship sometimes to get more value, who maybe just gone, we're just going to use an online bank where we don't have any people to speak to, weirdly have had this poorest conversion rate on them. So I said definitely there's a correlation there between, and in fact, it's been quite a good lesson we've been able to share with some of our clients saying, after this is over, you need to really go back and find out who your bank manager is and rebuild that relationship and make sure, because if this happens again, you want to know that you can pick the phone up to someone, correct? So, yeah. James, are you going to write this book?
I actually, I have started. I've written about, I think, 5,000 words.
Wow.
And so yeah, I have made an actual start on it. I suffer with sort of like imposter syndrome type thing. I'll write a bit and then read it back and think that's a load of garbage. Nobody's going to want to read that. And so I find myself, you said to me when we spoke about this before, you took yourself away and almost kind of put yourself in a self-exile just to force yourself to get it out on paper. And I wonder if that's kind of the same approach I need to take. I feel really strongly that I want to finish what I've started, just for my own pride. I want to think that I've published something. But it's that confidence to think that somebody's not going to just look at it and go, that's a load of rubbish, or he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's that fear of judgment, I suppose, that's holding me back. But it will get done one day.
I would say to you, and I think, when you said earlier on about people getting their opinions out there, I think this is becoming, more and more important for anyone running a business, that really to be able to demonstrate their expertise and thought leadership and put it down into whether it be a blog article, a LinkedIn post, some kind of video communication, an ebook, or actually a book. But James, I would say to you honestly, even when I wrote Agencynomics, at the end, I was like, is anyone going to read this? And I couldn't even look at my own words, and I'd have to give it to other people. They go, this is actually pretty good. And I go, really? So I think, isn't I just stating the obvious, so what I would say to you is, I think what you're saying, I don't get imposter syndrome, but even I had it. It's not easy writing a book, but I don't know if you've seen that app, Masterclass. They've got some fantastic writing lessons on there. I got it as my birthday last week, and I got it as a birthday present. And there's a training course on negotiations, which was just by a guy called Chris Voss, which I can't recommend enough. It's brilliant. But I saw the writing ones on, and I'm planning to write another book. So I thought, well, I'm going to just listen to those pearls of wisdom, because it was actually another writer that said to me, take yourself away somewhere quiet and just write, and turn all your social media off and just get it all down. But anyway, if you think it's not good, send it to me, and I'll tell you what I think. Give you a bit of motivation.
I will take you up on that. Definitely.
Good. All right. Well, listen, it's been great speaking to you both. I can't believe time's flown. It's like almost an hour already. Have you got any sort of final pearls of wisdom, James, that you just would share with an agency looking to be better at partnerships?
The last thing I would add, which is kind of just picking up on what Ingrid was saying a moment ago around being agnostic. Being agnostic is okay, right? And you need to be flexible enough to meet the needs of your clients and broad-minded enough to have multiple partnerships with all sorts of different organizations. And being agnostic is sitting on the fence, right? And I think sometimes that can also lead to lack of clarity and lack of focus and a lack of purpose. And so I would say that while it's important to be flexible, absolutely, I think sometimes it's the right thing to do to have an opinion and to come down in one camp or the other. Not saying that you're committing yourself for eternity to that camp. You know, if it doesn't work out and you need to repivot the business to a different tech stack or a different agency partner or whatever it might be, like you can do that. But I think when you try and be everything to everybody, you actually end up being nothing to anybody. So you've got to have that opinion. And if Kubernetes and microservices is the thing that gets you excited, then go be really good at that. Go invest in the partnerships that will help you get known for that. Go make that your thing. Don't try and say, oh, we can do a bit of this, we can do a bit of that, kind of what do you want? Here's a blank canvas. Because I think with tech the way it is in the market today, things are just evolving at such an incredible pace. You cannot know everything like you used to be able to do a few years ago. And even we see it, right? Even as Microsoft, I mean, Ingrid and I, we work in a partner organization. We have solution architects. They can only know a great amount about a very narrow set of things because it's just constantly evolving. So you can imagine they'd be useless if they just said, well, I know a little bit about everything, but I can't really help you because I don't know enough about that thing. You have to come off the fence and know something. So yeah, flexibility, good. Agnosticism, not always so good.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I love the way you position that because I'm a little bit anti. There's a big drive always on agencies focusing on niches, and the book which actually started a few years back, it's been out for about 18 months, 2 years now, but and was written probably up to 6 years ago. I always wrote in there, try and have as an agency, try to have maybe 3 or 4 sectors that you deal with. And be prepared for your own service to continually evolve. And what you just said is so true because, of course, right now, if you had an agency in event business or an agency in the travel industry or or a leisure business, your agency is really, if your niche, you're going to be hit pretty hard right now. And we ran a survey on our network, on our community that we just launched. Agencynomics, we just launched a free community for agency owners, and we actually ran a survey. It said that 85% of the people surveyed had actually won business in the last few weeks. And I can pretty much guarantee that most of those people have managed to pivot or adapt. And I think the word pivot comes very much from a technology world, not the agency world. I think agencies could learn a little bit more about, sometimes they're a bit too afraid to pivot or to adapt. I'm using the word adapt more because I think pivot gets a bit overused. But I think you're right. If you're able to focus on an area, but be prepared to continually evolve forwards, I think it makes you more flexible so that if things do change in your market, you don't get disrupted too quickly, which is something that's happening. Ingrid, any final sort of pearls of wisdom from you, would you say? Sitting on both sides, being on both sides, if you had to give a bit of advice to an agency that came to you today and said, how can I be better at partnerships? What would you say?
So I think I'd build on this point very, very much. You were saying have multiple sectors, and you know what? If you are truly agnostic and you have multiple vendors of whatever kind that you work with, that's absolutely fine. But you need to pick your focus, and I think picking your focus is so key to getting those early wins. So, be really specific that we're going to build a proposition with X partner in financial services on data, and it's going to really build on that practice within our business. because that means that you can have those quick wins and that kind of early success. And I'd hope that by the 5th year of your partnership with with a really successful partner, you are selling every single one of your services in every single sector, if that makes sense. But I think definitely that kind of pick a focus is key. And the second bit is hire an amazing partnership person. And if you can't because you're not big enough, I think make sure that partnerships is seen as a really, it is not sales, it is not marketing, it is something that leverages those two engines, but it is a whole nother kind of a whole nother area and a whole thing that you can add to your kit bag and make yourself more successful.
Yeah, I love that takeaway. I think I might have to go back and revisit that myself now a little bit, because I think that is probably something that often does get overlooked. And there are some agency businesses that are, do have good reserves and good financials, that they could make an investment in a hire like that, which would only reap medium and long-term rewards for that business if they made that investment. So that's fantastic to hear that. Thank you for sharing. So thank you both for giving up your time. Oh, we've got questions here. Totally agree. Clear ownership. These have been coming up the whole time and I've missed them. Clear ownership of roles, get some doing partnerships together. That's Matt, who's I know worked a lot with partnerships over the years. So thank you for both of you for your time. Really, really, really appreciate it. I know you're both busy people. James, I just love your little man shed, your man cave, I'm going to call it. It may not be a man cave, it might be a family cave, but I just got to say, mine. The Windows 95 box bringing back so many memories.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it.
I do. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Great, thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.
Bye now.